Well, I have the disadvantage of being trained as an economist, trained as a sociologist, and trained in urban regional planning. And so I want to tell you that up front, but I apologize for everything I'm going to say. I also have the distinct disadvantage of having been a university administrator since 1978 and just retired from 16 years as Chancellor of Western Carolina University, one of the UNC campuses. So I bring to you a very different view of things, I guess, interested, very much interested in research, but also fundamentally interested, okay, now what do we do once we have it? What really has caused me to be worried is not just the economy, but the tendency of the United States to look for the silver bullet. You know, by God, if we now just increase the number of college graduates in every state, we'll be competitive. And I thought, well, that's kind of an interesting question. What if everybody did that and they all majored in swimming? And they had a really good degree in swimming.
You'd be a great swimmer.
We'd be great, absolutely. But I don't know that we'd have any more businesses other than Speedo shops that would actually help us a whole lot. And so it began to worry me a lot. I said, okay, everybody's going to graduate, maybe, but we don't know where they're going to graduate, and we don't know what kind of world they're going into. And we're being told that this will cure our ills, and by God, all you universities ought to be out there increasing the throughput of undergraduate students to get that workforce out there. You've all heard that? If you haven't, you aren't reading the newspapers, you're talking to legislators, but it is in every state, it's the issue. So that was the number one issue. The second issue then to me was, if you're really going to do this, you're really going to make this push to change the nature of the workforce through education, and we ought to be paying attention to what the nature of the education is that these students ought to have, and who the students are. Because we know that it matters who those students are. There's a lot of literature out there that goes back generations, that women enter the workforce differently, that African Americans enter the workforce differently, that low-income people enter the workforce differently, and more recently, the Hispanics do. And there's not really, other than just kind of a broad brush, oh yeah, well, we have to get more of them in, there's not really much of a conversation about what that means. And so a lot of the work that I've been doing over the last year or so has been on this fundamental question, is using the Georgetown data, the Turner Valley data, can we estimate what the demands are going to be for educated labor based on his estimates for the future, and can we look at that and say, well, then what are the predictors of that? Number one. Number two, can we look at median household income, and can we use our economic information on the state and our socio-demographic information on the state to begin to estimate then what's median household income? Can we look at the differences among the states? Can we also look at the differences of per capita GDP among the states? And can we look at unemployment? Really key issues for us as we move forward. Now, I will tell you, I decided to focus on university students as opposed to general populations, because university students are the people that we're going to try to educate. And so if there are differences among the states in university students, does that contribute to some of these other differences? And in other words, are the structures of the university, who's in the universities, where they're going to school, and what conditions are they going to school, does that reflect the state in some broader way? And can those things be used to predict those four variables that I mentioned to you? Now, this push for college graduates, the Lumina Foundation, and I love their work. I think it's great stuff. I love Tony's work at Georgetown. I think it's great stuff. I'm right with the president. We're talking about increasing the number of graduates. I'm a former chancellor. You've got to have more graduates. But the bottom line is that it matters a whole lot as to who these students are, and it matters a whole lot about what your state's economy looks like. The language I'll use with you today is the new economy. And the new economy generally simply means anything that involves the use of electronics, technology, and networking. So biotech actually comes in under this as well. And it was interesting, I'll talk to you a little bit about that as I get further into the data, but the data don't, basically that's really the core. So what we're looking at is anything that involves the use of higher technologies, electronic technologies, and networking, really a new economy. So we're not going to get too specific or too picky. So the two research questions, two fundamental questions. One is, if we're looking at a state, you know, what does it mean to have an educated workforce? And we agree that it must have one. And then secondly, what happens when you start including sociodemographics and enrollment characteristics in your projections rather than just simply saying we need more? Okay, now, innovation and entrepreneurship, and I think it's really important. You know, all of us, I think, in this room understand that the vast majority of jobs are going to come from small and medium-sized enterprises. But small and medium-sized enterprises need to be parsed into multiple categories. If you look at the dominance of small and medium-sized enterprises in state GDP and state per capita income, state median family income, median household income, there's actually a negative correlation between the percentage of your economy that is in small and medium-sized enterprises and your median household income. It's actually statistically significant and negative. Now, why? Because most small businesses aren't new economy businesses. They're mom and pop grocery stores, they're small restaurants, they're tire shops. So we have to distinguish the innovation-based enterprises from other enterprises. And that's a really key if you're going to start talking about the role of small business in enhancing the economy in the future. Okay, now, we've also heard a lot today about networking and the importance of local areas, and it's just really key that we keep that in mind as we go forward. I looked at National Science Foundation data, standardized university level data, data from the Bureau of Economic Analysis, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the US Census, and combined them all up into a really large database with about 400 variables, and I'm going to walk you through each one of them in the next 10 minutes. But in the end, you can't use 400 variables. There's not a lot you can do with that. And so what it did was a pretty standard data reduction technique that allows you to look for patterns among the data. And it's called principal components analysis for those of you that care about this stuff. And use principal components analysis with a model that allowed whatever resulted to be independent. Okay? There are three key structures that turned out of all of these variables that really seem to define what it means to have a new economy in a state. One is simply the size of the activity. How much is going on? How much venture capital is there? How many new firms are there? What percentage of your workforce, or simply how many folks do you have are computer scientists? How many folks do you have are scientists? The simple sheer volume is one element. So California, obviously, big state, lots of high tech. So that's a kind of an example. But also, if you look at Massachusetts, is another one. Big state in terms of population, lots of high tech. The second one is business innovation. And I'll explain this one because this one shows up over and over again. I'll show you on a slide. And the third one is education-linked innovation, which if you look at some of our colleagues at Chapel Hill who aren't there anymore, I don't think, Harvey's gone, didn't really think that universities played a key role in all of this. They were there, but they weren't all that important. And that's not what these data show. If we look at the indicators for high-tech business innovation, and I've put these in order of importance based on the covariance that they have. Number one is employment in high-tech business as a percent of all employment. Not a shock. Secondly, computer specialists as a percent of the workforce. Okay. Third, business R&D as a share of total business outputs. So if businesses in your state is doing R&D, that is a big deal. What's one of the problems in North Carolina? Businesses aren't doing R&D in North Carolina any great amount. Engineers as a percent of the workforce. Not swimmers, engineers as a percent of the workforce. Then you get into others that are not quite as critical, which are the SBIRs and STTRs per $1 million of state GDP, venture capital per million of state GDP, and S&E graduate students per 1,000 people aged 25 to 34. That S&E grad student thing is really, really important. I'm going to keep coming back to that. And by the way, Western is not a big S&E university, so I'm not doing this because I'm a preacher for that particular issue. It's simply what the data show. Now, academic, education-linked innovation. The key indicators here are academic R&D as percent of GDP, non-academic R&D, not sheer volume of academic R&D. But academic R&D as a percent of state GDP, why? Because it looks at the penetration of academic R&D in the state. Second, S&E bachelor's degree per 1,000 people aged 18 to 34. Are you graduating people in disciplines that can do something to translate science into action? And those are the people in those S&E areas, not the swimmers. And I hate to tell you, probably not the sociologists. But some of us find good work.
On behalf of Councilor Bardo, I just want to apologize to all the swimmers out there.
Yes, yeah. I used to use basket weaving, but I come from Western North Carolina, and we're really into basket weaving, and so I had to stop that. So I thought, okay, we'll go to the swimmers. I thought about football too. Okay, so percentage 25 to 44-year-olds who are high school graduates, S&E graduate students per 1,000 again, and SBIRs per $1 million of state GDP. So what we're looking at is where you have graduate education in the sciences and engineering that is coupled with intense work of funded research, and where you have generally an educated population, and your students are coming out with higher percentages of them in the sciences and engineering, you're probably going to be more competitive. And that gets to the issue we're talking about the honest broker role of the university. Very important here.